Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it's time to dial in. Welcome back to another episode. It is your host with the most when it comes to football knowledge, Colin O'Callahan, and happy early Thanksgiving to all those who celebrate. So, whether you're watching the football games early or you just want to watch the Macy's Day Parade, or whether you're still crying about Alex Earl or Joe Childs now winning Dancing with the Stars, you can't help but admit that this is going to be a really fun week. And I am honestly excited for this episode because we got 3 games coming up on Thursday, one on Friday, a whole slate on Sunday, and of course, Monday Night Football. So I'm going to stop stalling. We're going to jump right into the show. Let me share my screen real quick to pull up the schedule. Nobody's on a bye this week, which is actually fantastic. So see right here, teams on bye, none. But I digress. We're going to start with the 1 o'clock slate between the Green Bay Packers and the Detroit Lions. This will be another game where the Lions have hosted on Thanksgiving. It's been a tradition since 1934. And this is going to be a pretty interesting grudge match between like two elite NFC playoff teams that are going to be fighting for a chance to win the NFC North because as you're full aware, the Chicago Bears somehow, some way are in first place in that division. So every game for the Lions and Packers moving forward is literally must win from here on out. Detroit's coming off an overtime victory against the New York Giants. They were down 27-17 in the fourth quarter, but I mean, I wasn't completely worried because not only did the Giants have one of the worst fourth quarter defenses in the league, but the Lions still have, an insanely efficient offense. And you just knew at some point in time with Jameis Winston at quarterback, something along the way would happen that would just cost all their momentum. And sure enough, after Jameis Winston had one of the best highlight plays of the entire season where he caught a reverse pass from Gunnar Olszewski, shook off Derek Barnes for a 33-yard touchdown, the Giants just could not do much of anything for the rest of the game. Jameis Winston threw an interception on the very next play. Then on the very next drive, they decided to go for it on fourth down in field goal range when a field goal would have increased their lead to 6. They don't convert on that. The Lions do enough to get into field goal range. Jake Bates makes a 59-yard field goal. And on the first play of overtime, Jahmyr Gibbs takes a 69-yard run to the house. And while Jameis Winston did get in scoring range on his lone possession of the extra period, a sack from Aiden Hutchinson on fourth down all but sealed the game, and it gave the Lions the victory. So am I completely surprised? Not really. I mean, I thought it was going to be like a blowout. I thought the Lions were going to bounce back tremendously against one of the worst defenses in the league because, usually since Dan Campbell has been the head coach, they've had like a very long win streak, after coming off a loss. So I was thinking like, okay, they're probably going to take out all their frustration and their anger against, a battered Giants defense. But to New York's credit, they were scrappy. They were opportunistic. They made a lot of plays early on, but just like the loss against the Packers, the Broncos, and the Bears, and I think Dallas, they just could have closed the deal. And, Jahmyr Gibbs had an outstanding game. He had well over 200 yards from scrimmage, had 3 touchdowns. Jared Goff was efficient as well, but, it was the running back out of Alabama that just had a better feel-good story. And, I mean, like I said, defense had their struggles, but they made better plays down the stretch. The Packers had a more comfortable victory against the Minnesota Vikings. They won that 23-6 at home. Jordan Love only had 139 passing yards, but to be quite honest, he didn't really have to be the hero. They didn't really have to do too much offensively. And Emmanuel Wilson, he still managed to run for 100 yards in his first career start because Josh Jacobs was hurt. Emmanuel Wilson ended up finishing with 107 yards on 28 carries. And yes, it took a muff punt for them to score their only touchdown of the second half, but the defense really carried the way from start to finish. I mean, they sacked J.J. McCarthy 5 times. They picked him off twice. I think they only gave up, 5 completions for 25 yards after halftime. So the defense really led the way from start to finish. They didn't give up a single touchdown. Yeah, they had their struggles with the run early on, but, number 9 just absolutely wet the bed when it mattered most. And I'm going to get more into the Vikings in just a second here, but Green Bay took care of business at home. They're still 7-3-1, but I just can't help but look at that one right there and just think, oh my gosh, like I just wish that they would have lost that game or even won. I mean, obviously you want them to win that game, but I just wish it didn't have to end in a tie. And the same goes for the Cowboys because it's like if one of them or both of them in this case end up missing the playoffs, that tie is going to be like the biggest what if for their entire season, to be quite honest with you. So now that we get into tomorrow's afternoon's matchup between the Packers and the Lions, it's a rematch of week 1 where the Packers absolutely thwarted the Detroit Lions 27-13 at Lambeau Field. I don't think Detroit ever forgot what happened in that game. And I'm sure that they're going to take out, a lot of that pent up frustration on Thanksgiving. But I think there are a lot of elements that have to come into play here. With the Lions, you wish that the defense can, slow down the run and squeeze the passing attack. But really, for the Packers to pull off another sweep, or to pull off the sweep, I should say, I am honestly expecting Jordan Love to, have a good game. And it's not the first time that this has happened on this stage. If you remember a couple years ago, he had well over 260 yards and 3 touchdown passes against one of the hottest teams in the NFL. But it's going to be a little more difficult this time because he has an injury to his left shoulder. Josh Jacobs, who knows if he's going to be able to play or not. The offensive line is still a little bit banged up. And to be quite honest, I have not been a big fan of Green Bay's offense all year. I know they've had like a few good performances here and there, but against the Lions, it could really go either way here. And I know Detroit is going to want to split the series. They want to keep up with the Chicago Bears so that they can win yet another NFC North title. And my question is, do the Packers have enough to keep up for 60 straight minutes? Because if they make one little mistake along the way, then my fear is that they're probably going to, stumble into a pretty frustrating and agonizing defeat. So I think the Lions will be able to win this game, take care of business at home. It's going to be really close. I think we're going to get one heck of a dogfight, but I expect Detroit to win this game 23-20. Now we get into the second Thanksgiving matchup as the Dallas Cowboys host the Kansas City Chiefs. This is going to be a high-scoring affair. I think both offenses are going to play extremely well. Patrick Mahomes and Dak Prescott are going to do everything they can to win. And the reason why I say that is because both of them did exactly just that a few days ago. The Kansas City Chiefs, they overcame a 20-9 deficit against the Indianapolis Colts at home. Daniel Jones only went 9 of 19 after halftime. The defense didn't give up a single touchdown in that span. And while the offense had, a tough time, trying to reach the end zone, they only scored 1 touchdown the entire game. They made enough plays down the stretch to not only force the game to go into overtime, but Mahomes led another game-winning drive to set up an easy chip shot field goal for Harrison Butker. Mahomes finished with over 350 yards. Kareem Hunt had 30 carries for over 100, which is probably the most he's had since his first or second year in the league, which is quite phenomenal considering that was like 7 to 8 years ago. So Kansas City's offense, showed up at the most important time of the game, and they showed up in the clutch. The defense, they gave up like a couple big touchdown drives early on, but they settled down the rest of the way. And now they're going on the road, which is not been the biggest strength for the team this year because 4 of their 5 losses have been away. The Chargers in week 1, the Jaguars on Monday Night Football. There was the Bills loss. There was the Broncos. And then the last one, how in the world am I stumping with that? The last one was at home against Philadelphia. So 4 of the 5 losses were not in their home stadium. So this is going to be a huge test for them, especially against the Cowboys team that just overcame a 21-0 deficit over the Philadelphia Eagles. The defense gave up 3 straight touchdown drives to start the game, and the offense got up to as terrible of a start as you could ask them for, or as you could ask. They couldn't convert on 4th down on the opening drive. They turned the ball over twice. Even in the second half, they got off to a pretty bad start because they punted on the first drive. Then they, missed a 51-yard field goal the next. But after the 3rd touchdown drive for the Philadelphia Eagles, the offense just right on schedule, completely shut down in every single facet. There were several punts. They had a missed field goal of their own. Saquon Barkley lost a fumble. And Xavier Gibson tried to be a hero by fielding a punt from the 1, got the ball launched out inside the 10. Dallas fell on it, and eventually they not only tied the game, but Dak Prescott led a game-winning drive down the field to set up a makeable field goal for Brandon Aubrey. They scored 24 unanswered points. Dak Prescott ended up throwing for 350 yards. George Pickens had an outstanding game. He's now, second in the league in receiving in almost every statistical category. And the defense, since the bye week, has been absolutely tremendous. They have been well improved. They haven't let up a lot of big plays the way that they did earlier in the season. Quinton Williams has been a huge addition. A lot of the guys in the secondary are starting to return from key injuries. But this is going to be their biggest test of the season because, yeah, you were able to pull off a 21-0 comeback against the division rival. But what's going to happen against Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, Travis Kelce, and Steve Spagnuolo, coaching the defense? So I think we're going to get a heavyweight dogfight, and I know that we're probably going to get an overtime finish. The only reason why I'm picking the Chiefs is just because I have more trust in their nucleus and their continuity. And as much as I want to see Dak Prescott be able to, beat the sleeping giant known as Patrick Mahomes, it's going to take a near perfect game for the Dallas Cowboys to, have a chance of pulling off an upset. And I'm scared that one little slip up or one 3 and out or one mistake is just going to completely swing the momentum the other way around. So I like the Chiefs in this one, and I think they'll win this game 33-30, but I just need to see how much does it really mean to the Dallas Cowboys to win this particular game? Obviously, the last 2 victories against the Raiders and Eagles were impressive, but could they continue it for a third straight week? Because if not, then, Stephen A. Smith is just going to have one heck of a Thanksgiving dessert. That's all I'm going to say. Speaking of the dessert, let's get to the Thursday night matchup between the Baltimore Ravens and the Cincinnati Bengals. I know everyone's going to hype this game a lot because Joe Burrow's coming back from the turf toe injury, and rightfully so, but, this is just a mismatch on paper. The Ravens didn't look too impressive against the Jets last Sunday. They didn't score a touchdown in the first half. They only settled for 3 points. They were actually trailing at halftime by 4 points, but, they ended up scoring 2 straight touchdowns to begin the third quarter. The Jets offense, right on schedule, just went nowhere. They turned it over on 4th down to begin the half. Breece Hall lost a fumble inside the 10-yard line. They only had 3 more points. And, the only silver lining is that Tyrod Taylor was slightly better than Justin Fields, but that's just not saying much. And the fact that there are Jets fans that are still coping with that fact, it's not even funny. It's just pretty sad and kind of hopeless at this point. So, Baltimore just did what they needed to do at home. They didn't screw up. They weren't great at all, but, you can't really ask them to do, too much against one of the worst teams in the league. The Bengals, that was actually, their loss to the Patriots was probably more frustrating than, I don't even know. The reason why I say that is because their defense actually looked respectable on Sunday. I'm not even kidding with you. I guess one of the best teams in the NFL, obviously the best team in the AFC. They held Drake May to just 1 touchdown, 19 points, 12 of them off of 4 made field goals from Andy Borealis. Geno Stone had a pick 6 to give Cincinnati a 10-0 lead. And they had several stops inside their own 5-yard line. Like, the Patriots had several chances to just punch it in at the 1, but the Bengals just said, nope, you're not getting through us today. And yet, somehow, some way, they still lost because the offense decided to not show up at any point of the game. They did have 1 big touchdown drive late in the 4th quarter that made things interesting in the final minutes, but Joe Flacco, albeit with a bad shoulder and apparently a twisted finger, couldn't throw for 200 yards. T. Higgins didn't really have that big of a game. They missed Ja'Marr Chase badly, and this is with Chase Brown actually having 100 yards, which is probably something that the Patriots defense has not allowed from a rusher this season. So Cincinnati's defense did everything they could to try to win that game. Yeah, they had a bad breakdown early in the first half that, got the Patriots back in the game. But outside of that, they played as well as you would have wanted them to play. And the offense just completely let them down at the most important moments of the game. And with 4 days to prepare against a Ravens team that's won 5 games in a row, I don't know how much of a chance they'll have. They will be getting Ja'Marr Chase back, which is great, but T. Higgins is out with a concussion. They're still not going to have Trey Hendrickson. They don't have Cam Taylor-Britt, who's been one of their top corners. And now you're going up against Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, Zay Flowers, Mark Andrews, and a Ravens defense that, once again, needed to, overcome a very bad start to the season, and now they've, slowly improved over the last few weeks. So I'm going to pick the Ravens to win in a somewhat close game, but I don't know if the Bengals can, put put up a perfect fight for 60 straight minutes. So I'm going to say that the Ravens win this one 34-27. So, all right, now we get to the Black Friday matchup between the Philadelphia Eagles and the Chicago Bears. I can't even guarantee that the Eagles are going to win this game. Yeah, they're at home, but my gosh, their offense is absolutely horrible. I mean, I get that their offensive line is banged up with injuries, but Saquon Barkley only had 10 carries for 22 yards. A.J. Brown actually had a respectable performance, yet after taking a 21-0 lead, the passing game just spun around in circles, and I've never seen a team do everything they could to try to lose the game and for it to actually work out in their favor. I just haven't seen it. I mean, you had fumbles left and right, multiple punts. The Dallas Cowboys, taking big shots down the field and connecting on them, beating Cooper DeJean multiple times in the process. I know Eagles fans are like, oh yeah, we got this under control. We're wearing the Kelly Green jerseys. We're up 21-0. The Cowboys are freaking frauds. We're back on top. And this isn't anything like strategic wise. This is just straight up karma. And it's just flat out deja vu to the 2023 season. When they came off an outstanding Super Bowl season, they have huge expectations coming into the next year, and all of a sudden, you have a lot of flaws to start the year. You pile up a lot of wins, and then you just implode down the stretch. That is what this season is reminding me of. So, against the Chicago Bears, there is no margin for error because the Chicago Bears defense, albeit without 3 of their starting linebackers and 2 of their top corners, have an opportunistic defense. They're one of the best teams in takeaways. And offensively, you just know eventually they're going to make winning plays down the stretch to, show up in the clutch. Caleb Williams, for the first time last week, anytime the defense gave him a short field, he actually got the team in the end zone. They didn't stall out for punts. They didn't settle for field goals. They actually moved down the field, and their drives were successful. And that was the biggest reason why they were able to beat the Steelers with Mason Rudolph at quarterback, but Chicago ended up beating a team with a respectable record. So if I'm the Chicago Bears in this game, I need to make sure that I pick up where I leave off, because if they somehow, some way think that they're gonna just play exactly the way they did against the Vikings or the Commanders or the Raiders, they're sadly mistaken, because the Eagles defense, they're gonna take out all the anger they had from that loss to the Cowboys against the Bears offense that can be inconsistent at times. And while Chicago's defense can force a lot of takeaways and, make a lot of game-saving and momentum-swinging plays, you just know that they have some flaws as well. They're not that great at stopping the run. And with Kyler Gordon and Jalen Johnson still on injured reserve, you just know that, Philadelphia has a couple big pieces in A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith to, open up this field a little bit. So I'm going to pick the Eagles for now, but I think we're going to get a really close game. Their offense is just so frustrating and so depressing to watch. But I think for the Bears to win, they just, like I said, winning in the fourth quarter is not going to be enough. They got to put their foot on the gas early, and just like they did against the Steelers, they're going to need to respond off of, fourth down stops and turnovers with touchdowns instead of just, gifting the ball right back to them. So I'm going to say the Eagles win this game 20-17. That's my final score. Now we're going to get into Sunday's festivities, and I think that we should start with this one between the 49ers and the Browns. The reason why? This is a trap game, and I am going to immediately pick the Cleveland Browns, and here's the reason why. Brock Purdy, in a Monday night win against the Carolina Panthers, threw 3 interceptions. One day earlier, the Browns and Shedeur Sanders' first start as a starting quarterback beat the Raiders 24-10 while sacking Geno Smith 10 times. 10. Guess how many sacks Myles Garrett had in that game? He had 3. For the season, it's 18. Just for the record, he only needs, 5 more sacks to beat TJ Watt's record for the most sacks in a single season. But that's not even the reason why I have the Browns winning this game. It's going to come down to coaching. You got Kyle Shanahan, head coach for the 49ers, and Jim Schwartz, the defensive coordinator for Cleveland. Jim Schwartz is 9-1 against Kyle Shanahan. The last time they met was a few years ago in Cleveland. PJ Walker was the starting quarterback for the Cleveland Browns. They ended up winning that game 19-17. Why? Because the 49ers offense completely imploded when you least expected it. Everyone thought that the 49ers were going to win this game easily, that the Browns had no chance, but the offense ran into quicksand, and the defense ended up, doing what they could to try to win that game. But, Cleveland's was just a little bit more aggressive. And the 49ers would end up winning the NFC that season, while the Cleveland Browns, they made the playoffs that year, but they ended up getting annihilated by the Houston Texans. So, from my standpoint, coaching definitely plays a huge factor into a lot of NFL games. And I think when you look at this particular history between one of the most aggressive minds in the league and an innovative offensive play caller, the former usually has the upper hand in this particular matchup. And I feel that we're going to get a similar script because while the 49ers defense, I should say, while their defense is sturdy, and Robert Saleh should be the assistant coach of the year because he's just that incredible of a motivator. I just don't know how much, punishment that unit can take with all the injuries that they've sustained. And if they're on the field too long, then it's only going to be a matter of time before Quinshon Judkins or Jerry Jeudy or even Harold Fannin Jr. has a big play down the stretch that allows Cleveland to, pull ahead by double digits. So, my final score, going to pick the Browns to win 17-10. The biggest reason why, I just don't know if Brock Purdy is going to be able to have an outstanding game against the future Defensive Player of the Year, one of the best defenses in the National Football League, an outstanding, brilliant offensive mind, and just 1 week after throwing 3 picks and doing the bare minimum, really, to beat the freaking Carolina Panthers. So, Cleveland wins 17-10. All right, I'm going to stop with the quiet voice and move on to this next game here. We got the Jacksonville Jaguars versus the Tennessee Titans. It's going to be a boring AFC South matchup on the surface, but something tells me that this is going to be a little bit of a closer game because the Titans have been somewhat better in their last 2 weeks. Yeah, they still lost, but they only managed to lose by 1 score. Meanwhile, the Jaguars barely escaped overtime against Jacoby Brissett and the Arizona Cardinals. While their offense turned the ball over, I shouldn't even say the offense, it was Trevor Lawrence. While Trevor Lawrence turned the ball over 4 times. 3 of them interceptions and another on a scoop and score. 2 of those turnovers led to touchdowns. So, my big picture takeaway from that game is you don't turn the ball over, that game doesn't even go to overtime. Actually, if you don't even try to go for it on 4th down in the final minute of the game, there's no chance that this is going into an extra period. You would have probably just won by 3 and the game would have been over there. But, to Trevor Lawrence's credit, he did have some moments. He had over 250 passing yards. He had 3 touchdown passes. And, at the very least, he got them in front when they fell behind in the 4th quarter. And on the first possession of overtime, he at least gave them the lead. But Trevor Lawrence is just absolutely frustrating to watch. Do you realize he's got 14 touchdown passes, and he's got 11 interceptions? Like, he is the definition of a hot and cold quarterback. Just moments where you're like, oh my gosh, this guy actually, is doing what it takes to win. And there are others where you just think to yourself, why in the world did the Jaguars give him a long-term extension? So, against the Tennessee Titans, you better not screw up if you're Trevor Lawrence. You don't even need to have that great of a game. Just do the bare minimum, manage the game, hold on to the football, and let the defense take care of the rest. Because we saw just a couple weeks ago them absolutely pummel the Los Angeles Chargers 35-6. If they can run the ball effectively and just dominate the trenches, I think they're going to be in really good shape here. So, the Tennessee Titans, they lost to the Seattle Seahawks. We kind of expected that. It really took like a long touchdown pass to Jackson Smith-Njigba for them to, for the momentum to swing entirely into Seattle's direction. And yeah, Tennessee's offense had a couple of big drives late in the 4th quarter, but they were empty calorie stats. Their first touchdown was off a punt return. And, if you take that away, you still lose by double digits. So, they couldn't run the football. They gave up 4 more sacks. The defense just, wore out and they couldn't stop the big plays to JSN. And, they just proved to be the worst team in the National Football League. They just continue to prove it week after week after week. So I'm going to pick the Jaguars for now, but my guess is we're probably going to get a closer game than we expect. For the final score, I'll say they win 23-13. I mean, the Texans only beat them by 3, and the Seahawks only won by 6. So I'm hoping that the Jaguars just take the message that, okay, Tennessee's going to play scrappy. They're going to play, with a lot of energy. All we have to do is just not try to do too much, and we'll be good from there. So that's just my preview on that one. Now let's get to a more appealing AFC South matchup. We got the Houston Texans versus the Indianapolis Colts. Yes, the Colts have a better record than Houston right now, but don't be mistaken. Both of them are a little bit in a different boat right now. The Colts have lost 2 of their last 3 games, while the Texans have won 3 straight and are officially back in the playoff hunt. Thursday Night Football was a dominating statement made by the best defense in the National Football League. After letting up a 45-yard touchdown run to James Cook on the opening possession, they didn't let the Bills reach the end zone, or the Bills offense, I should say, reach the end zone for the rest of the night. I think the only touchdown that the Bills even scored through the rest of the game was off a punt return, or a kickoff return, I should say, from Ray Davis Jr. So after that touchdown run, Buffalo's offense just could not do much of anything. Josh Allen got sacked 8 times. He threw 2 interceptions. Khalil Shakir lost a fumble, and yet it was still a 1-score game the entire way. Houston Texans, I mean, Davis Mills had a couple of promising touchdown drives. They ended up leading by 4 because of that. But in the second half, they only had 35 yards of offense. Like, they were pretty much just doing everything they could to be like, all right, Josh Allen, do something with it. You're undefeated on Thursday Night Football, and we haven't won a game on this stage. We'll let you, get right back into the playoff race. And the defense just showed no mercy whatsoever. Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter kept flying off the edge. Kalen Bullock had an outstanding game. D'Amico Ryans and, Keith Burke, I think that's the name of the defensive coordinator. They had an outstanding game plan to really bottle up and just completely beat up the reigning MVP. And in the second half, they didn't really do too much like trying to run the football. I mean, James Cook didn't get completely shut out of the game plan, but, just the more sacks that the Texans had, the further back that the Bills offense got pushed back, and they just, they couldn't, anytime that, even with a successful hook and lateral on 4th and 27, they couldn't make the plays that they needed to get out in front and win the game. And so, I know Buffalo's going to be looking for a bounce back win against the Steelers, but from the Texans' perspective, they're thinking we can do the same thing against the Indianapolis Colts, because what we've seen from them in 2 of their last 3 losses, if you can't run the ball with Jonathan Taylor, Daniel Jones is not going to be the guy that's going to pick you out of the mud. Now, the 5 turnovers against the Steelers was one thing, but after 2 amazing touchdown drives led by Daniel Jones in the first half, they only settled for 2 more field goals to begin the second half, and then 4 straight 3-and-outs. I mean, keep this in mind. First half, Daniel Jones goes 10 of 12 for, 95 yards? Let me pull this up. 94 yards. Yeah, 10 of 12, 94 yards, 2 touchdown passes, no interceptions. In the second half, in overtime, he went 9 for 19. 9 for 19 on the road against the Kansas City Chiefs, albeit while you're up 20-9 against Patrick Mahomes. You got to win that game. And the fact that they let it slip away because of offensive ineptitude, it's unacceptable. And to be quite honest with you, I'm not going to give the Colts that much of a chance to beat the Houston Texans, because Houston is second in points allowed. They have one of the best sacks. They're top 10 in sacks. They're top 5 against the run. They're top 5 against the pass. And meanwhile, when Indianapolis cannot run the football, their offense just, doesn't have that same oomph or that same burst to it. So I understand that the Colts are undefeated at home, but the Texans are playing with house money right now. And with CJ Stroud coming back into the lineup, I know their offense is going to get, the spark that they need. And more importantly, it's going to energize that defense enough to, have one of their, I wouldn't even say one of their more dominant choice, because we saw what they are capable of on Thursday night. But my thing is, the minute that their offense gets into a groove, that defense, they don't need a lot of extra weight on their shoulders. They can just simply take care of business and go from there. So I'm going to be quite honest with you. I think the Texans are going to give the Colts their first loss of the season, and I think their defense is going to be the biggest reason why they win. And as long as CJ Stroud just, shows more of the promise that he had in his rookie year, more than the slumps that he had in year 2 or year 3, then I think Houston's going to be in really good shape. So I'll say it's a close game, but I still think Houston will pull through 23-20. Okay, now we have the Dolphins versus the Saints. So we have a little bit of a more boring matchup here. So I thought the Saints were actually capable of beating the Atlanta Falcons, but the offense did not show up whatsoever. They had multiple turnovers. They had multiple fourth down stops. They didn't score a touchdown the entire game. But the worst part about it was the fact that Blake Grupe missed 2 field goals. He already had 8 through the season. Well, he had 8 after this loss to the Atlanta Falcons, but he had 6 entering that game. And 24 hours later, he ended up getting cut. And they replaced him with Cade York, which is not an upgrade whatsoever. But I mean, if you're Kellen Moore, you're just like, I don't know, you're just trying to make sure that this season just doesn't end on a very terrible note. But I think after this loss, I think they're just admitting that this season is a wash. I mean, their offense was absolutely pathetic. They couldn't run the football whatsoever. I mean, Chris Olave was really the only decent receiver that they had. I mean, they even had a chance to make it a 1-score game, at the 1-yard line, early in the second half, and they couldn't even convert on that. So the defense, they did what they could. They had a big pick 6 from Justin Reid to stay alive in the game, but that was the only touchdown that they scored. They ended up letting up a couple big plays to Davis Sills and Darnell Mooney that allowed Atlanta to put the game out of reach. And I mean, the Falcons weren't that great themselves. Like, the fact that they barely ran the ball in the second half was a little bit startling, but at the same time, they didn't really need to do too much. As long as they just, didn't screw up the rest of the afternoon, they would be decent and they would stay in front. So I don't know. I don't really have much to say on that one because that game was just too boring and sad to watch. Dolphins are coming off a bye week. They've won 3 out of the last 4 games. I expect them to, take care of business at home and at least try to salvage some dignity that they might have lost early in the year. I'll say the final score is 24-10. Now, with the Falcons and the Jets, I mean, I'm just going to keep this short. I mean, both fan bases are deluded into the fact that they can, still turn things around or that, they have hope for the future. But, I mean, Kirk Cousins does not bring confidence. You could just tell the Falcons are just desperate to move on from his contract when the season is over. Michael Penix Jr., he's probably not going to return in time for the start of the season. I don't know what the injury timeline for him is because he's got a partially torn ACL. But when it comes to this particular game, both defenses are going to play well. But I just have more faith in Atlanta because you got Bijan Robinson and you got Tyler Algier. And if you're the Jets, if you can't do anything with Breece Hall, then you just go absolutely nowhere. So, and more importantly, Atlanta's defense is a lot more aggressive than a Jets unit that still doesn't even have an interception, which is just flat out pathetic. So, I mean, I don't really care about this game that much. I'll just say the Falcons win 20-10 or something. So, all right, moving on. We got the Rams and the Panthers. If Carolina actually pulled off the upset against the 49ers, this would actually be a little bit more of an entertaining matchup. But despite the defense picking off Brock Purdy 3 times, Bryce Young only scored 3 points off of those turnovers. And he only had 28 yards in the first half. He ended up throwing 2 interceptions the entire game. And what was really frustrating to me was the fact that Bryce Young couldn't even push the ball down the field to save his life. Most of his passes were just simple checkdowns or screens. And I'm just saying to myself, what are you actually doing? This was a game that was winnable for Carolina. Their defense, yeah, they did let up a lot of touches and a lot of yards to Christian McCaffrey, but they only let up 2 touchdowns at the beginning of both halves, and they only allowed, 2 field goals through the rest of – they only let up 2 field goals, afterwards. So the Panthers defense, albeit with, some key injuries to their secondary, they were doing everything they could to try to keep this game competitive, but the offense just kept letting them down drive after drive after drive. They didn't run the ball effectively. They couldn't even utilize Rico Dowdle or Chuba Hubbard the way they wanted to. And Robert Saleh just had one hell of a gameplay to say, okay,
we're not letting you run the football. We're making you win this game by yourself. And Bryce Young, when you have expectations or some semblance of hope for him, just couldn't show up and failed to deliver. And now you're going up against the best team in the National Football League, the Los Angeles Rams, who absolutely demolished the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Their offense was near unstoppable. Matthew Stafford had 3 more touchdown passes and another game with 0 interceptions. He now has 30 touchdowns to only 2 picks, which is catapulting him to the top of the MVP race. Their offense is one of the best in the National Football League. Their defense is flat out stupendous. I mean, Chris Shula should be getting head coaching interviews, next week or in 2 weeks if it were up to me. But they're scrappy, they're opportunistic, they fly around on all 3 levels. And against Tampa Bay, they just showed no mercy in all 3 phases. They beat them up 34-7, and now Baker Mayfield is unfortunately dealing with a shoulder injury to his non-throwing shoulder, but it's it's an AC joint sprain, which is kind of medical term for somewhat of a separated shoulder. I think that's what it is. I'm not even going to speculate on that. But the point is, the Rams, there are not a lot of teams in the NFC that are going to stand in their way this year. Maybe Detroit or Philadelphia, but both of them have their flaws, and they're not as strong as they used to be. So this is LA's year to lose. So I think in this game on the road, they should take care of business. As long as they don't, try to do too much, and as long as they don't get in their own way, then I think they'll be fine. I'll say they win this game handedly, 34-17. Speaking of Tampa Bay, we got them playing the Arizona Cardinals. I don't think this is going to be a blowout at all, because since Jacoby Brissett has been the starting quarterback for the Arizona Cardinals, they've had multiple chances in the fourth quarter to beat legitimate foes. They had chances to beat the Packers and the Colts and last week against the Jaguars, but the offense fell into quicksand and the defense couldn't get the 1 or 2 stops that they needed to hang on for the win. And that is exactly why they are 3-8 right now, right? Yeah, 3-8. So I know we're going to get a very scrappy and a very competitive game. I know that Jacoby Brissett is going to, total probably 300 yards, and, Baker Mayfield is going to, try to, keep his foot on the gas early on. But it's just, really, it just comes down to those final 15 minutes. And unfortunately, Arizona just has not been able to do that when it's really mattered. And the Bucs, on the other hand, Baker Mayfield, people forget that most of his wins earlier in the season have come on game-winning drives. So I have a little more faith in the guy that can, show up in the final 2 minutes than the guy that doesn't really do much with the chances that he's given. So I'm going to pick the Buccaneers to win this game 26-19. Now let's move on to the late afternoon window, beginning with the Minnesota Vikings versus the Seattle Seahawks. Sam Darnold didn't show up 2 weeks ago in the game of the year against the Los Angeles Rams. Now he has a chance to somewhat right the ship against, his former team, the one that let him walk away in free agency for next to nothing. Do I think he's going to struggle? Yes, because Brian Flores is, an incredible defensive mind. And really, since J.J. McCarthy has been the starting quarterback, that defense has been the biggest reason why they've, stayed competitive and why they've, tried to, win the game as much as they could. Obviously, there were a couple of duds against the Eagles and against the Chargers where they just couldn't pull off a single stop. But, that was with Carson Wentz at quarterback. With JJ, their defense does everything they can to try to win the game. Unfortunately, their offense, particularly their quarterback, is absolutely atrocious. J.J. McCarthy, once again against the Packers, was absolutely horrible. No touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 5 sacks. And now the reports were that, and we're hearing that, he is just, working his way back from being cleared from concussion protocol. And I get it. Concussions are serious injuries, especially in the NFL. But it seems like every time he has a bad game, there is something that comes up. After getting embarrassed by the Falcons in week 2, he had the ankle injury that kept him out long term. When he lost to the Baltimore Ravens at home, his hand somehow got banged up. What in the world do the injuries have to do with the poor decision making? Let me read the statistics right here for his alter ego 9. If I could pull it up real quick. Here we go. 6 touchdown passes, 10 interceptions. He's got the second worst completion percentage and passer rating. He's third worst in yards per attempt. He's dead last in QBR, and he's got the worst touchdown to interception ratio in the National Football League. So I understand that he's somewhat of a slight upgrade from the third stringer, Max Brosmer, who would have been in line to start if, McCarthy wasn't cleared to play, or if he isn't cleared because, practices start today for teams playing on Sunday. But the point is, Minnesota needs better play from their quarterback because J.J. McCarthy is not seeing the field well at all. When you have that supporting cast with an effective running game and the best receiver in football, a lethal passing attack, and one of the strongest defenses in the National Football League, and the reigning coach of the year, helping you develop along the way, it's unacceptable. And the Seattle Seahawks, unfortunately for them, I should say, are one of the best teams in the NFC. Their defense is fantastic. Their offense has, Jackson Smith-Njigba, who's been playing, out of his mind. Their running game is effective. Sam Darnold is still playing extremely well. So Minnesota has a lot of ground to make up for. And I think the only way they can do that is if their defense plays out of their minds, or if J.J. McCarthy finally gets out of his own way and decides to have, somewhat of an effective game. I'm not saying he should throw for 380 yards and 4 touchdowns or something like that, but I just want him to look respectable because he's too likable of a player and he has too much promise for him to be one of the worst quarterbacks in the National Football League this year. People are already labeling this kid a bust, and this is his first year as a quarterback. So you need to get it together, my man. So with that being said, I still think the Seattle Seahawks should take care of business at home. Their defense is, more confident when they play under their control or under their conditions and under their terms. And as long as Sam Darnold doesn't screw up, I think their offense will be in really good shape. So I'll say the Seahawks will win 28-16. Now we get to the Chargers versus the Raiders. Oh, boy. I'm going to be quite frank here. The only way I can actually see this be a close game is if the Raiders bench Geno Smith. I hate to say it, but this offense is completely cooked. Chip Kelly got fired, which honestly, it was a hire that should never have happened in the first place, but he ended up getting released 24 hours after their loss to the Cleveland Browns. Their offensive line is absolutely atrocious. Ashton Janney is running into a mosh pit every single game. The only effective receiver they have is Brock Bowers. Geno Smith is leading the league in interceptions, and unfortunately, the organization is just archaic. It is outdated. It has lost all of its glory that it had in the past, and unfortunately, Mark Davis, who just doesn't seem to know how to adapt to the modern league, is just, it's just really sad to see what this organization has become. And, the only way I was actually going to get excited to see Jim Harbaugh and Pete Carroll play in another rematch is that the Raiders were actually good this year, and they're not. Chargers win 34-10. We're moving on to this next game. Bills and Steelers. So Aaron Rodgers might be coming back from the slight break in his left wrist. Both are coming off unfortunate losses. Both are going to, play with a lot of energy and a lot of juice. But Bills' offense is at least a little more effective than a Steelers' offense that just somehow spins in circles week after week after week. I mean, listen, there are games where you don't expect Josh Allen to, lay a complete egg. But there are other moments, particularly against stronger teams, where you're like, okay, I can work with this. This is exactly why, he ended up winning the MVP last year. So I think we're going to get somewhat of a similar script. And I think the Bills should make enough plays on both sides of the ball to really wrangle both lines of scrimmage 27-14. So if they somehow lose this game, though, then the panic button really needs to be hit because Dolphins, okay, division rivalry game. Thursday night against the Houston Texans, just bad luck. But if you lose to the Steelers, a change needs to be made. And I don't know where it's going to be made, but there's no way that they could just, stay content with the way things are and just, expect to, make it back to the conference championship or win the division in this case. Because, yeah, look at that disparity between them and the Patriots. So, anyways, you got the Denver Broncos versus the Washington Commanders. Both are coming off bye weeks, so there wasn't really anything to recap. Like I said, I'm just going to keep it short and sweet. The Broncos they should win this game by multiple scores, because if the Seattle Seahawks were able to absolutely trounce this team on the same stage in the same stadium, then I don't know how Bo Nix and this Broncos offense can have somewhat of a similar performance. The Washington Commanders offense is just so sad to watch when it's not at full strength. No Jaden Daniels, no Terry McLaurin, no Austin Eckler, a feeble offensive line, and you're going up against the Denver defense that is third in the league in scoring and number one in sacks. I mean, this is just a mismatch. So as long as Bo Nix just has an effective game and just doesn't try to play over his head, then I think the Broncos should win this game 40-13. And I'm not exaggerating. So that win streak should continue. But let's see if New England's can on Monday Night Football against the New York Giants. I'm going to be quite frank. I don't think that this is going to be a blowout at all. I mean, Jackson Dart, if he comes back from concussion protocol, I might feel a little more confident just because, like, he hasn't played football in the last 3 weeks. If Jameis Winston is starting, then I'm actually legitimately terrified, because the Patriots last week were not good against the Bengals offensively. Against the worst defense in the National Football League, they only scored 19 points. They threw a pick six early on. The offensive line suffered a lot of, injuries. They lost Jared Wilson. They lost Will Campbell. Morgan Moses ended up leaving early due to an illness. And now you're going up against a Giants front who has one of the NFL's leading sackers in Brian Burns, a dominant nose tackle in Dexter Lawrence, 2 more capable edge rushers in Kayvon Thibodeau and Abdul Carter. And yes, they did fire the defensive coordinator, Shane Bowen, but if the Bengals secondary was able to, limit Drake May the way they did, then who's to say that the Giants defense can't? I mean, New England had 9 plays inside the opposing 5-yard line in the second half, and they couldn't score a touchdown once. I mean, I know that the Patriots are a lot better coached than they've been in the last few seasons, but I'm really getting a lot of scary flashbacks to 2021. And honestly, I wouldn't be too upset if the Patriots lost this game before the bye week, because it at least will give their players and the coaching staff a lot of time to, decompress, to relax, to, heal up. And by the time they come back from their bye week, they could, play with a sharper focus and a, different kind of edge. If they somehow win this game by 3 points, I mean, looking at the rest of their schedule, there are definitely a few losses that they're going to be due for. I mean, they got the Bills at home, on the road at Baltimore, at the Jets, and then versus Miami. So I am a little bit scared that if the Patriots win this game, then they're going to get a little bit over their heads and say we're going to run the table in the AFC the rest of the way. So obviously, as a Patriots fan, I want them to win, but I am hoping it is not by the skin of their teeth. And unfortunately, objectively, I think that it's going to happen. So I'll pick the Patriots to win for now, but I mean, the Giants are just always that annoying little brother that just finds a way to bring you down at the worst possible moment. And, looking at the history between these two teams over the last 2 decades, I wouldn't be surprised if the Giants, pulled off yet another upset, in the final minutes of the game. So, but I'll still say New England finds a way to get it done, 30-27. And with that being said, our Week 13 picks are official. So let's look at the playoff picture before we close this show. So the Patriots would still have the number 1 seed. The Bills would have the 7th seed. Interesting. Denver would still lead the AFC West. Chiefs wouldn't be in the playoff picture, but the Chargers would. Jacksonville would be leading the AFC South, which is crazy to think about, while the Colts would be a wild card contender. And then Baltimore would still be leading the AFC North, okay? And Pittsburgh would just be completely pushed out. In the NFC, obviously you got the LA Rams. They're 10-2. Seahawks would, hold a wild card spot, while the 49ers would be on the outskirts looking in. Eagles would still be leading the NFC East, but, who knows how the Cowboys are going to finish the rest of the season. The NFC North, we got 3 teams in the playoffs, which I'm actually kind of, happy about, because I think all 3 of them deserve their spot. The Lions and the Bears would be tied for first place. The Green Bay Packers wouldn't be far too behind. And Tampa would obviously be coasting through the weakest division in that conference. So with that being said, thank you all so much for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe for additional content. I hope you have a tremendous Thanksgiving, a fun Black Friday, and an even better weekend. I'll see you next time. Goodbye, everyone. Love you.